On Monday, October 9th, 1972, after a weekend of open diving, 4 divers stopped to explore one last remote sinkhole on their long journey back home. Lured by the promise of cool and clear water, the divers made a fateful, unplanned dive to explore Elaine's cave. In those depths, poor judgment and cruel chance conspired against them, sealing their fate and giving the cave a chilling new name, the Death Cave. Elaine's cave was a famous diving site before the incident, after which it was permanently sealed, in the hope that such an incident would never happen again. The cave system is a vertical drop with a steep descent followed by horizontal passages. It is more than 90 feet underground. The passages are like labyrinths, meaning they twist and turn, potentially with narrow sections and dead ends. However, before this cave, almost every single diver mentioned a single thing: its visibility, which was described as poor due to silt and organic matter, limiting divers' ability to see potential dangers. The divers in this cave diving expedition were of various ages and experience levels, which would explain the decisions each would make deeper down the cave. 17-year-old Ron and Christopher were relative novices with just 18 months and 2 years under their belts, and 18-year-old Sandra was similarly inexperienced. However, 39-year-old Dave stood apart from the young divers. He was the most seasoned team member with 15 years of diving behind him. Despite their varying experience in open water diving, they needed more practice in one specific area: cave diving. Dave, the most seasoned member of the group, was eager to explore its submerged passages. "It'll just be a quick look," he said. They all agreed it would be a quick in-and-out exploration, at most 30 minutes, so they decided not to take their safety guideline gear with them. The divers had knowingly submerged themselves in an underwater cave system without any way of leading them back to the cave mouth. The group swam around the shallow parts for 5 minutes, exploring the low areas surrounding the walls. After about 10 minutes, they swam down the western side of the primary silt mound, discovering the only relatively open area. Being the team leader, Dave expressed his intention to go in for a short distance to inspect the passage. He made this decision knowing that he had no guideline to navigate through the cave's twists and turns, putting himself and the entire group at risk. They moved deeper into the cave's mouth, securely fastening their oxygen tanks. The water around them was cold and silent, broken only by the faint bubbling of their regulators. However, it quickly became apparent that they needed to depend entirely on Dave to guide them through this underwater maze without their safety line. As they glided through the narrow passage, they encountered multiple tight spots. They marked progress by hammering rods into the cave every 19 feet to act as guidance. Emerging on the other side, they found themselves in a vast cavern with clear water. Ron turned to check on his companions, only to discover a disturbing sight. The entry passage was now entirely obstructed by a thick silt curtain. Their movements through the soft, silty floor had stirred up the particles, transforming the once clear water into a dark, dusted cloud. Fear hit Dave as he signaled the group to limit their exploration to avoid losing visibility and blocking their exit. Feeling urgent, they knew that any delay could prove fatal, so they began to search for an exit passage. Dave told them to move slowly due to limited visibility. However, they were too scared and anxious, unprepared for this eventuality. In their fear, they ignored Dave, and as a result, their thrashing whipped up even more silt into an impenetrable cloud that now obscured the cave walls, meaning that the rods they had placed on were now completely gone in the dust cloud. They were now over 50 feet underground, with zero visibility and no means of locating their route back. With less than 15 minutes worth of oxygen and 17-minute trip to the surface, they were confronted with a dire question: wait for the cloud to settle and risk running out of remaining oxygen, or test their luck and try to find an exit in the underwater sandstorm they've created. They've bet their lives on the latter option, knowing that their lives were on the line, They acted quickly. Panic started to creep in as their flashlights dimmed and flickered due to low battery. Dave, their team leader, tried to guide them through the darkness, but it was impossible as they had no sense of direction. Ron felt his way through the water, desperately seeking an escape route. As they swam, collisions in the inky blackness became frequent as they relied on touch to find their way around. In one frantic moment, Ron crashed into Dave, their hands briefly connecting in the dark, but the relief was short-lived as they drifted apart, lost in the abyss. In the background, the faint sounds of their fellow divers added to the confusion. There was a tapping noise here, a regular free-flowing there, but these sounds did little to help each other gain a sense of direction. Despite their efforts, they could not locate the source of these sounds. Time was slipping away, and Ron's anxiety intensified. His flashlight flickered, threatening to plunge him into utter darkness. But then, a terrifying realization hit him as he struggled to breathe. He was running out of air. Desperation forced him to reach for his reserve air lever, a final lifeline before the inevitable. As he pulled it with his trembling fingers, a rush of relief swept over him as the backup supply flowed into his lungs, saving him from the brink of suffocation. But it was only a temporary solution, as he soon realized that the rest of the divers had unknowingly gone deeper into the cave. It had been 2 minutes since Ron had switched on his emergency reservoir. He now had 10 minutes of oxygen left, but since he was disoriented and separated from the group, he had no idea which way to go. It was becoming increasingly evident he might drown before he managed to get out. He swam alone with no sense of up or down in the disorienting void. His breath came in panicked gulps now as his tanks ran low. Strange noises echoed through the cave, the clang of cylinders, the gurgling suck of regulators. Were those his friends? He scraped his knees, squeezing through a tight crevice, his hands probing the way ahead. His light flickered feebly. He had minutes left. Then, miraculously, a faint green light pierced through the darkness. It was the entrance. As he managed to get out, no one was there. He scanned the cave entrance and noticed no bubbles disturbed the surface. No other divers had followed him out of the cave's lightless abyss. Horror gripped Ron as he now knew his friends remained trapped inside. With only 9 minutes left before their air ran out, he tore off his gear and sprinted to the truck, desperately searching for the satellite phone to call for help. The responder on the call quickly responded, telling Ron that the first responders would be there via helicopter within 12 minutes. He then checked his watch and realized, with the oxygen reserves, they would only have about 9 extra minutes. Back in the cave's dark depths, the other trapped 3 had yet to locate a way out of the cloud of silt. The silt cloud had swallowed Dave instantly, separating him from the rest of the group. Dave calls out, heart pounding against his ribs, but his voice is silenced in the respirator. The space around him feels tighter now, the dead cave air growing thin in his lungs. He fumbles for his backup regulator as the swirling particles clog the one in his mouth. Nearby, Christopher and Sandra call each other in muffled voices underwater, rising in panic. Dave swims forward with one hand along the wall guiding him, and his head spins because of the lack of oxygen. After swimming in an unknown direction for about 50 feet, he saw a faint green glow overhead about 30 feet away, and he began to lose consciousness due to a lack of oxygen. With a surge of hope, he kicked toward that beckoning light, but no matter how much he swam, the glow's distance did not change. His tank was running out of oxygen, and his body could no longer keep going. He struggled to press on, and his vision began to dim. After a couple more seconds, he lost the battle and went into a deep, never-ending sleep. About 20 feet away, Christopher and Sandra, who'd already used their emergency air reservoir, clung together trying to find a way through the fog. However, what was unknown to them then was that they were heading deeper into the cave, thinking they were swimming towards the surface. Hand in hand, they feel along the cave walls, scraping over rocks, desperately searching for the rods they had placed earlier. They had hoped to see only Dave's light, which he had dropped when he lost consciousness, reflecting off the silt particles at the entrance of the cave. On the surface, Ron desperately tried to guide them with the rhythmic tapping of his cylinders above water, but it yielded no results. They were at a dead end, 30 feet below the entrance, with less than 5 minutes in their reserves, and their only hope was that the rescue team that was 8 minutes away would come and rescue them. With nowhere else to go, they continued to struggle to find an exit until at last, Sandra and Christopher too lost their consciousness, joining Dave in the afterlife. The surface team arrived 13 minutes after the call, but it took them about 4 more minutes to suit up and adequately prepare their gear. Thus, it was approximately 5 minutes since their reserves would have ended. It was determined they had all already passed away, and it was too dangerous to extract the bodies due to the silt reducing visibility. The day after the devastating incident, professional diver Mac Laurie, a close friend of Dave, embarked on a dangerous recovery mission. Armed with a hookah and a 5-hour air supply, Mac ventured into the cave's depths, facing numerous challenges. Inside the cave, he discovered the lifeless body of Dave not far from the entrance. Further inside, Christopher and Sandra, now forever bound together, lay in a narrow dead-end passage, a cruel twist of fate in a cavern they have mistaken for their way out. The cave had claimed 3 lives, and thus it was decided to seal it off permanently, and the name Death Cave infamously stuck. While Death Cave ended in tragedy, the 55-hour saga of a family fighting to stay alive when flash floods trapped them in a Slovenian cave was put in an even more dire situation. To find out more, just tap on the video on your screen. See you there.